2 miles, 3 miles, something like that. There's Twin Buttes, Priest Butte, Rattlesnake Butte. Family lived in their home between the buttes, and this lady gets up in the morning, makes coffee. She stands in the kitchen window looking out over the sink toward Rattlesnake Butte, which is the one farthest west, and it's a distance of a half a mile, maybe a little bit more. And it's daylight, but just breaking day. Well, here's the mothership, just hovering, if you will, in a kind of a little natural depression up on the side hill. And the saucer-type ships are flying in and around and over the top and going around the hill and back again, going in and out of the belly of the mothership. Well, then she wakes her husband up, and he gets up, and they watch this together for like a half an hour. Finally, in their visitation between themselves, they decide to call me, but she doesn't. She said, "Are you busy? Can you come out?" She didn't say what she was looking for or looking at, and I wasn't bright enough to ask her. I just said, "Yeah, I'll be right there." So I got dressed and went out, and unfortunately, I drove right by where this had been.
Oh.
Yeah. As it turns out, it left before I got there, but I didn't know why it was going or what I might have been looking for or looking at. But she gave the two of them, they gave a pretty explicit description of what they saw, and they called it a cigar-shaped mothership because of the entry and exits of the little guys into the bottom of it. And she said it went out of sight by going west around the hill, and then just because of the hill, it was gone.
Was she fairly close to it?
Half a mile or about that distance from her house.
Pretty close.
Yeah, and the little basin or draw that it was hovering in, all I had to do was just barely come out of there and around the corner and it was out of sight. Yeah. Every time I go down that road, I think of it and I look at it and boy, I wish you'd come back. That'd be quite a view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the Pearson case?
Yes. Yeah. And that one, they never had a reoccurrence. And farm people, just good, solid people. And see, first thing in the morning, that's what you woke up to.
Certainly don't think anybody ever lied to me about it.
No.
Okay.
I never felt that anybody was, not setting me up, but there just because they wanted some notoriety or something. It's something they saw. And I do pretty good interviews. If I'm looking at you for some reason, I've got a reason to talk, and I can do interviews. So I think I have the ability to pull that out of somebody if they're not being truthful.
Right.
I never ever felt that way from the people I talked to. Just good people.
General Yousefi ordered a second F-4 to engage the UFO. The lead pilot was Iran's #1 top gun, Major Hussein Jaffari.
It was around 12 miles. We lost communication, and I heard nothing from the pilots. So I was so scared what's going to happen and what happened to the pilots.
When the F-4 retreated, communication was inexplicably restored.
So I asked from the tower controller to tell them to continue their mission and see if they can get more information from the lineup.
Then Major Jaffari nervously reported that a smaller UFO had emerged from the larger one and was trying to engage him.
And it was coming toward them. They tried to shoot him down. When they squeezed the trigger, it didn't work. And the trigger was inoperative. They couldn't shoot the missiles.
The pilots, fearing for their lives, tried to eject, but the eject button jammed. Every backup system was inoperable.
We understood that the eject instrument also didn't work. So in this case, I said to God, "Oh God, save them."
The F-4 had no choice but to go into a negative G-force dive to escape this seemingly hostile UFO. When the fighter jet was 10 miles away from the larger UFO, the smaller craft flew off, and all onboard communication and instrumentation was restored to the F-4. Major Jaffari reported that the smaller UFO appeared to be landing on a mountaintop just southeast of Tehran. This landing was confirmed on the radar by the control tower. Brigadier General Yousefi witnessed it from his balcony.
He bent it down and landed on the ground. And now it is a communication between the mothership and that small flying object. And it shows the lights between those two. It's connected. While they were landing, the tower was screaming on the phone to me, "General, this flying object is following them and is going to land in Mehrabad. It is in the short final, and I see a big light with the glaring red, blue, and yellow lights."
The so-called mothership tailed the F-4 into Mehrabad Air Force Base and flew low over the runway. As it performed what was described as a low-altitude flyby, power at the Air Force Base went out.
That was strange for us, and we asked each other why the power went out for some seconds.
Frankly, I don't have any explanation for that, but I will say that there are other cases, well documented, where power has been disrupted on the ground over fairly large areas during UFO presence.
After the flyby, the craft roared off toward the west, as if to say, mission accomplished.
I looked up as I started to run towards the house, and there was this large, like the blimps we see at football games where they view what's going on, only it wasn't. And along the edges were kind of portals-like thing. It almost looked like people sitting in there looking out at the distance from me. They were relatively close, and I could make this out. And out of the bottom were these disc-shaped saucers that would be just about big enough for maybe one and sometimes two people to be sitting in there, like a little airplane type thing to ride around in. So they were probably maybe 15, 20 feet in diameter would be my best guess. And you'd see one zip out and go over and disappear, and then maybe another would come back, come straight up in the bottom and go into this craft. And I was pretty excited to see this. In those days, you could hear a little bit of people talking about UFOs and their concern. And as I came out across the field there, I saw that, and I looked around, and we didn't have too close of neighbors, but I looked around, and the one neighbor that was past where we lived was at a corral, and he and a son or someone were trying to load some sheep in the back of a pickup. So I changed my course and ran the best I could at my age, because I wanted to point it out to somebody so that somebody else would know what I'd seen. And I was running over there. It probably took me 3-4 minutes to get there, and I was breathing pretty hard. And I looked at them. They says, "What's wrong?" And I says, "Did you see what I saw?" And I turned to point up, and they looked up, and I looked up, and this thing was completely gone. So they looked at me and kind of laughed, and I went back to the house and got the tools and went back down in the river, brought them, told my brother, and he says, "Yeah, right," he didn't see it either. And when I came home and stuff, then I mentioned it to my mom, and she was kind of quiet, but was kind of interested. And I think she took me more serious than anybody else in the family.
I immediately seen a bright, what I thought was a star in the sky. And I took a closer look at it, and then there was another one alongside it. And all this sort of happened in a couple of seconds. I said, "Look, I said two stars across it," to Simon, who was sat in the back of the van. Simon pointed his head around, and at that point we could see what was a cigar shape. And there was 4 lights in there. So we were all wondering what this was.
So just to interrupt you there, Jeff, the 4 lights in a row.
Yeah.
So you could actually see some structure behind the lights as well, could you?
Yeah, there was the cigar shape, and
right.
within that cigar shape you could see the sort of 4 lights,
right.
which we knew were lights at this point.
Okay.
We all decided to get out of the van and have a closer look. By the time we'd got out of the van, the craft was over us. It was a circular craft, and it was about the size of a football field from memory. We were just in awe of it. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. And one of the things that struck me was how fast it had come across from that distance, because I think you can sort of see about 25 miles to the horizon with no interruption. So it had travelled all that distance by the time we got out of the van. We were looking up at it. There were some sort of pylons to the right hand side of us. We'd made our way across there because that's where it was above us there. At this point I thought there were like lights running around the outside of it, I could see. And then Wayne got back in the van and tried to start the van, but the van wouldn't start. And then what happened was something from the centre of the craft came out and dropped down into what was the lower car park. Now I didn't know what it was at this point, because it was somewhere I'd never been, but Simon was living in the area. I said to him, "What's down this thing?" And he said, "Oh, it's just a lower car park." He said, "It's just a dingle down there." So at this point this craft shot off and went towards Abergavenny, but didn't build up speed, no sound off it, just went and it was gone. And this other craft was down in the bottom now.
So something came out of the larger
craft,
field-sized craft. Okay.
When this craft shot off, the main one, the van started, and Wayne was shouting to us to get in the van and go. He wanted to go, And I said, I'm going down there. I said, I've got to know. Even though I was frightened, I was absolutely petrified what I'd seen. I had to go down and have a look to see what was down there. And I said to Simon, how far is it to walk? He said, we can walk it. It's no problem. So Simon said he was coming with me. And then there's another boy with us, Yeka. He was the other boy in the band. He said, I'm coming with you too, which left Wayne on his own. And then I think Wayne sort of realised that he was sort of the oldest one of us and he had to look after us and what have you. I think that's what it was. He agreed then to take us down. So we got in the van and we went down to the bottom car park. When we got down there, we parked the van, got out, and we could see this smaller craft that had come out, and it was like as if it was scanning the area.
So how high off the ground would it have been?
Well, at this point it was dark. It was getting dark, so it was difficult to see. I couldn't make out where the dingle was in comparison to where the craft was.
Right, but by the time you'd got down to this place, it had got dark.
It was getting dark because all you could see was like this light. Mm-hmm. It looked like a light underneath the craft, mm-hmm. and the craft was sort of scanning back and forth. And this went on for quite some time.
Did you get any impression of the shape of the craft?
Just circular again, I think.
Circular, okay.
Yeah.
And size? Obviously smaller than the larger.
Yeah, a lot smaller. Very difficult to say, to be honest.
Big enough for someone to be in it?
Yeah, I'd say that was possibly the case, because when it came out of the craft, it looked to be maybe 12 to 15 feet in diameter, right. I think.
So let's just go back to the larger craft. So there was some daylight at this point when it's come and hovered right over the top of you.
Yeah.
So what was the underside of it like? You say it was circular, the size of a football pitch, but can you give some detail of lights and texture?
There was lights around the outside of it, but the underside of it was all dark. It was all sort of like black.
Right.
I couldn't see any definition of what was there.
Right.
But again, it was. When we saw the main craft, there was a light sky, so it wasn't like it was black at this point. It was a light sky and it was a dark craft, but there was lights running around the outside of it.
Mm-hmm. And can I just ask, were they rotating or were they still? Can you remember?
They were running around.
So there was some movement of the.
There was some movement of light.
Okay.
There was.
Yeah.
But no sound.
Right.
And as I say, when it took off, it didn't sort of build out, so it just went, right. And it was gone. Mm-hmm. And the moment that craft went, the van started. But when we were down in the bottom there, this thing looked like it was scanning the dingle. But as I say, because it was dark at this point, I couldn't make out how far off the ground it was. Mm-hmm. But I had this impression or this feeling that this craft was coming back behind us, the main one.
How close did you get to that thing that was scanning the land?
Difficult to say. We were in the bottom car park. We couldn't go any further because it was a dingle. We couldn't see.
So it's not changed that area any?
I don't think so. I mean, I haven't been up there for
right.
I don't know how many years.
Right. So you didn't wait until this smaller craft still there when you left?
It was still there when we left. Yeah.
Right.
I tried to get Wayne to go back because once I knew there was a car behind us, I wanted to see what the outcome of this was.
Right.
But Wayne wasn't having any of it. I'm going.
Right.
So I then persuaded him to go to the local pub where my two older brothers were, mm-hmm. And tell them about it. And when we got there, a friend of theirs wasn't surprised that we'd seen this craft.
And they named Richie Havens, and he said he wasn't surprised at what we'd seen because all the locals had sort of seen different lights in the sky and different sorts of goings on, you know. Mm-hmm. And he also said that up here somewhere there's a magnetic field, and he said that it was his thoughts that they were attracted to that for some reason.
All right. You don't know why he thinks that, or you just something.
Because to start with, I was a little scared of him because I thought that maybe he was sort of taking the mick out of us a bit, but he wasn't. He was quite serious that he'd had lots of friends who told him about different stuff going on up here, lights in the sky and that sort of thing.